My son secretly sold my late husband's Rolex for just $800. He didn't know that inside that watch was a secret compartment containing the key to a fortune worth nearly $3 million. But what no one expected was that my husband had already foreseen his own son's betrayal, and he left a perfect trap to protect me even after death. But before continuing, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave a comment where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories go. Stop complaining, Mom. It's already sold. Just get over it. My son Miguel's words hit me like a slap. I froze in the kitchen, my hands still wet from the dishes I was washing. The coffee cup Francisco used every morning trembled between my fingers. 6 months. Only 6 months since I buried my husband of 43 years, and now my own son had sold Francisco's Rolex without consulting me. That watch was much more than an object to me. It was what was left of him, something I wound religiously every morning, keeping alive a ritual Francisco taught me. It was my daily connection to the man I loved for more than 4 decades. Mom, seriously, get over it. It's just a clock, said Miguel, leaning against my kitchen counter as if he owned the place. Beside him, Jimena, his wife, didn't even look up from her cell phone. It was at that moment that I first tasted betrayal. Its metallic bitter like coins on the tongue. I swallowed and asked with a calmness I didn't even know I possessed. What pawnshop? Jimena finally deigned to look at me with that air of condescension she had perfected over the years. Ah, that's good. Now you're being reasonable. Honestly, Dolores, clinging to material possessions isn't healthy. Francisco wouldn't have wanted you to live in the past. I bit my tongue to avoid responding. Since the funeral, Jimena had been telling me what Francisco would have wanted whenever it involved me giving them something or accepting some decision they made for me. The pawnshop on Avenida Revolucion. Miguel replied, looking at his own watch, a very expensive Apple Watch that probably cost more than what he'd sold his father's Rolex for. They gave me $800, not bad for something that old. $800. A paltry $800 for a 1978 Rolex Submariner that Francisco saved up during 3 months of overtime to buy when Miguel was born. The watch my husband wore every day of our marriage, except for the day he died when the hospital handed me the object in a plastic bag, along with his wedding ring. That watch was worth at least $3,000. I replied, feeling my anger rising. Jimena snorted. In what universe it didn't even work right? Or because I was the one winding it up, keeping it alive, keeping Francisco alive somehow. But they would never understand. Miguel and Jimena lived in a world where everything had a price, but nothing had memory or meaning. I'm going to get it back, I announced, determined. Good luck with that, Miguel said, walking toward the gate. We're flying out tomorrow morning. Jimena has been planning this trip to Italy for months. Jimena followed him, but stopped at the door with that expression of false concern she used when she wanted to appear affectionate. Dolores, you really should consider therapy. This obsession with Francisco's things isn't normal. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone with the bitter taste of betrayal and the silence that had become my constant companion since Francisco died. But here's what Miguel and Jimena didn't know about their pathetic old mother. I spent 40 years as a bank manager. I knew the difference between giving up and strategic planning, and I had stopped giving up. The next morning, I drove to the northern pawn shop. It was exactly as I imagined it, cramped, dusty with fluorescent lighting that made everything look sick. The man behind the counter had tattoos on his arms and a tired expression. Did you come for the Rolex? He asked, before I could even open my mouth. How did you know your son warned me you might show up? He said he was having a hard time letting go. He shrugged apologetically. Look, ma'am, I'm sorry for you, but business is business. I paid fair market value. Fair market value. As if there were a standard price for 43 years of marriage for the sound of Francisco winding that clock every morning while the coffee brewed. To the weight of him in my hands as the hospital nurse placed him there along with his wedding ring. "I'll buy him back," I insisted, "whatever it takes." The man whose badge read Diego looked uncomfortable. "It's already sold. A guy came in this morning and paid cash. There are no returns on this business." My heart sank. Some stranger was walking around Mexico City wearing Francisco's watch, and I'd never see him again because my son needed money for pizza during his vacation. "But here's the thing," Diego continued, lowering his voice. "We found something strange when we were cleaning it up for sale. It disappeared into a back room and came back with a small brown bear. There was a hidden compartment in the back. A jeweler must have done a really professional job. I found this in here." Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, in Francisco's careful handwriting. Dolores's birthday, July 15th, 1955. The day I knew I would marry her. Below that, a series of numbers and letters that looked like some kind of code. SS4457QI15AGDS. I stared at the paper, my hands shaking. In 43 years of marriage, Francisco had never mentioned any hidden compartment in his watch to me. He had kept this secret hidden in plain sight on his own wrist. "Do you recognize these numbers?" Diego asked. I shook my head, but something about them bothered me. They seemed familiar, like a password or an account number. Francisco was meticulous with his records, always noting important numbers in his careful handwriting. "The guy who bought the watch?" I asked suddenly. "What was he like?" Diego's expression changed, becoming more cautious. "Why, because my husband hid this for a reason, and I think whoever bought that watch may be in for a surprise." "Ma'am, I really can't. Please." I leaned forward, letting Diego see the mourning that was still raw after 6 months. "That watch is all I have left of him. I'm not asking you to break any laws. I just want to know if the buyer seemed to know about the compartment." Diego was silent for a long moment, studying my face. Finally, he sighed. He didn't say much, but when I mentioned that we'd found something in there, he became very interested. He asked if we'd opened it. A chill ran down my spine. He gave a name. He paid cash. "You don't need to fill out a form for purchases." Diego paused, but asked specifically about watches that had recently arrived. He said he collected vintage Rolexes. I left the pawn shop with more questions than answers. Someone was specifically looking for Francisco's watch. But why and how did they know about the hidden compartment? The piece of paper burned in my purse like a secret I wasn't sure I wanted to reveal. Francisco had hidden it for 47 years, hidden from me. What else was my husband hiding? That night, I sat at Francisco's desk in our bedroom, surrounded by 43 years of financial records. Francisco kept everything: bank statements, tax returns, investment account statements. Everything filed in his precise and methodical manner. The clock code stared at me from the piece of paper. SS457QI15AGDS. I'd searched every account we owned, every investment, every safe. Nothing matched those numbers. Francisco had been financially conservative throughout our life together. Savings account, checking account, a modest retirement fund. Nothing fancy, nothing hidden, or so I thought. My phone rang, interrupting my search. Miguel's name flashed on the screen. "Mom Jimena's upset. She says you made a scene at the pawn shop." I almost laughed. In what world was trying to recover my husband's stolen watch, causing a scene I went to buy your father's watch back? Unfortunately, someone else already bought it. See, problem solved? Time to move on. The casualness in his voice made my chest tighten with anger. This was Francisco's son, the baby Francisco had worked double shifts to support. The boy Francisco taught how to play baseball and how to change a tire. When did Miguel become so cold? Miguel, there was something hidden inside the clock. Your father left me a message. Silence on the other end of the line. What kind of message? His voice changed, becoming more alert. I'm still not sure, but they look like account numbers or a password. Mom. Her tone made me doubt. This was the first time Miguel seemed interested in anything related to his father since the funeral. What exactly did the message say? Just some numbers, I replied vaguely. Probably nothing important. Maybe I should go there, help you decipher it. Now I laughed bitterly and sharply. Yesterday you told me to stop living in the past. Do you want to help organize Francisco's things today? Miguel sighed heavily. Okay, be stubborn, but don't come crying to me when you go crazy chasing ghosts. After he hung up, I looked at my phone. Miguel's sudden interest was suspicious, but I couldn't understand why. He'd made it clear that he considered Francisco's possessions worthless sentimentality, unless they weren't just sentimentality. I returned to the desk, but this time I approached it differently. Instead of looking for accounts that matched the numbers, I started looking for patterns. Francisco had been an accountant before he retired. He thought in systems in logical progressions. That S could be Social Security. Francisco's number began with 457, but not 444157. Q could be Ciudad Universitaria or Mexico City, which led me to think of the initials for universal citizenship. QA 15AG was a combination of letters and numbers that made me stop. AG could be August. 15th of August 15th, our wedding anniversary. DS were my initials, Dolores Silva. I grabbed my laptop and started researching. Mexican bank accounts or those in tax havens used codes like this. So did offshore investment firms. 3 hours later, I found it. Secure Solutions Investment Management based in the Cayman Islands. The website was discreet and professional, catering to high-net-worth individuals seeking privacy and security. The account login page required a client number and password. With trembling fingers, I typed SS 4457 Chi 15 AGDS into the customer number field. A valid account number appeared on the screen. Now I needed the password. Something only I would know. Something Francisco knew I would discover. I tried our wedding date, our address, my birthday. Nothing. Then I remembered the note. Dolores's birthday, July 15th, 1955, the day I found out I would marry her. It wasn't my actual birthday. July 15th was the day we met at a summer party in Chapultepec Park. Francisco always said he knew that night he would marry me one day. I typed 07155 and held my breath. Access granted. The screen that loaded next made me gasp. Current account balance 2,847,139.67. Francisco had hidden almost $3 million from me throughout our marriage. I stared at the screen until the numbers burned into my retinas. $8 million in an account I never knew existed in a bank I'd never heard of, hidden by a husband who spent 43 years convincing me we were living paycheck to paycheck. Every argument we had about money, every time I clipped coupons or bought generic groceries or mended Francisco's work shirts instead of buying new ones, all while he had millions in an offshore account. My first instinct was anger. Pure hot anger at the deception, at the lies of omission, at 43 years of wondering if we'd have enough for retirement while Francisco secretly stashed away a fortune. But then I clicked on the account history. The first deposit was made in 1982, 3 years after Miguel was born. $5,000. The entry read Initial Inheritance Investment, FS Inheritance. Francisco had never mentioned any inheritance. I scrolled through years of deposits, all relatively small, 500 here, 1,000 there, regular contributions that explained why Francisco had been so careful with our household budget. He wasn't hiding money from our income, he was systematically building something separate. The deposits continued steadily until 2008, then jumped dramatically. Instead of hundreds of dollars, Francisco was depositing $10,000 and $20,000 at a time. The notation on those larger deposits made my blood run cold. Real estate liquidation properties in Mexico City. Francisco was buying and selling real estate without my knowledge, properties I'd never seen, investments I was never consulted about, businesses that had apparently made him rich. How do you live with someone for 43 years and not know they're conducting secret transactions? I clicked on the account's messages and found a folder titled Dolores Emergency Access Only. Inside was a video file sent just 3 months before Francisco died. I hesitated before clicking play. Whatever Francisco had to say about this secret fortune, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. But I was alone in our bedroom at midnight. My son had stolen the only clue to this mystery, and I was apparently rich beyond my wildest dreams. Ready or not, I needed answers. Francisco's face filled the screen, looking older and more tired than I remembered. He was sitting in his office at work, probably having recorded this during his lunch break. Dolores, if you're watching this, I'm already gone. And something went wrong. Francisco's voice was firm, but his eyes looked sad, weighed down by a weight I'd never realized during our years together. I hoped you'd never have to access this account, that we'd grow old together, and that I'd eventually tell you about it over dinner one day. He paused, rubbing his face with the same gesture he always used when solving a difficult problem. The money isn't mine, dear. It was my father's, hidden before he died in 1981. He made me promise to keep it a secret, to protect it, to use it only if our family was in real danger. Francisco's father had died when Miguel was only 2 years old. I remembered Francisco's devastation. I remembered the modest inheritance that had paid off our mortgage. Apparently, there was much more to it. My father saw what the Depression did to families, how quickly stability could disappear. He wanted to make sure his grandchildren were always protected no matter what happened. Francisco looked directly into the camera, and I felt as if he were sitting right next to me. I've invested the money carefully, conservatively. Every cent is documented, every transaction is legal. It's grown because I've been reinvesting for 40 years, but the original amount was for emergency funds, insurance against catastrophes. The video continued with Francisco explaining the details of the account, the investment strategy, and the legal protections he'd put in place. But I got stuck on one sentence. I hoped you'd never have to access this account. Francisco had died of a heart attack at work. Sudden, unexpected, with no warning signs. How could he have known I'd need that money, unless the catastrophe he was protecting himself against wasn't random? Unless Francisco had known something about our family that I was only just beginning to understand. The next morning, I called the library, where I worked part-time, and said I was sick. For the first time in 6 months, I had something more important to do than organize returned books and quiet teenagers. I needed to understand what Francisco meant by real danger. The investment account had detailed records going back 40 years, but I started with recent transactions. Francisco's last deposit had been made just 2 weeks before he died. $25,000 with the notation, sale of property, emergency liquidation. Emergency liquidation. Francisco was converting assets into cash before his death. I spent the morning researching every property transaction Francisco had ever made. The man I'd been married to for 43 years had apparently been a secret real estate mogul, buying and selling properties all over Mexico City with money I didn't know we had. But here's what made my blood run cold. Every property Francisco had sold in the last year had been purchased by the same buyer, a company called Inversiones Silva, SDRLDCov. Silva was also Miguel's last name. I picked up my phone and called my nephew Fernando, who worked in real estate. If anyone would know about real estate transactions in Mexico City, it would be him. Aunt Dolores, how are you feeling? I'm fine, dear. Hey, I need to ask you something. Have you heard of a company called Inversiones Silva, SDRLDCV? Fernando was silent for a moment. Actually, yes. They've been quite active lately, buying properties in good neighborhoods. Cash deals moving fast. Why do you know who owns the company? I can find out. Give me an hour. I spent that hour going through Francisco's desk, more carefully looking for any documentation regarding his real estate dealings. Hidden deep in his file cabinet behind 40 years of tax returns, I found a folder marked Insurance Policies. But instead of insurance documents, the folder contained contracts, property deeds, and correspondence related to Francisco's investments. At the bottom of the pile was a letter that made my hands shake. It was from a private detective dated 6 months before Francisco's death. Mr. Silva, in accordance with your request, I completed the investigation into the financial activities of your son, Miguel Silva. My findings are troubling. His son has accumulated approximately $180,000 in gambling debts with various offshore gambling sites. He has also taken out multiple high-interest loans against his business, using fraudulent information about his income and assets. Of greater concern are the inquiries Mr. Silva has made into his property. He has contacted 3 different attorneys asking about inheritance laws and the process for contesting wills. He has also inquired about power of attorney procedures and elder care facilities. I believe his son is planning to have him declared incompetent in order to gain control over his assets. The documentation I've uncovered suggests you've been investigating that option for several months. I recommend you take immediate steps to protect your assets and ensure your wife's financial security. Sincerely, Tomas Hernandez, private investigator. My phone rang. It was Fernando. Aunt Dolores, you won't believe it. Inversiones Silva S. de RLDCB is owned by Miguel Silva, your Miguel. I closed my eyes, the pieces finally falling into place. Francisco wasn't hiding money from me. He was hiding it from Miguel. Every property sale, every cash deposit, every emergency liquidation had been Francisco systematically moving assets out of Miguel's reach. Francisco had known his own son was planning to rob us, but Francisco died before he could warn me, leaving only the hidden compartment in his watch as a clue to finding the truth. My son hadn't stolen Francisco's Rolex for vacation money. He'd stolen it because he was looking for exactly what I had found access to: Francisco's hidden fortune. And now that Miguel knew I'd found something in the watch, he wouldn't stop until he figured out what it was. I was still sitting in Francisco's chair, looking over the private detective's report, when I heard Jimena's key in my front door. She had an extra key from the funeral, supposedly to visit me when Miguel was at work. I now understood that she was checking on Francisco's assets. "Dolores, are you here?" Jimena's voice echoed through the house, artificially sweet. Miguel and I stopped by before heading to the airport. I quickly shoved the private detective's report back into the folder and minimized the offshore account on my laptop screen. Whatever Miguel and Jimena were up to, I needed to understand the rules before revealing my cards. In the room, I shouted back. They appeared in the doorway moments later. Miguel carried a small suitcase, and Jimena wore the kind of clothes that screamed, "expensive vacation." Her designer sunglasses probably cost more than most people's rent. "We just wanted to say goodbye," Miguel said, but his eyes were scanning Francisco's desk, taking note of the papers scattered around me. "What are you working on?" "Organizing your father's things," I replied carefully. "There are so many things I never knew." Jimena approached, her gaze focused on my laptop screen. "Did you find anything interesting?" The question seemed casual, but I noticed the sharp attention in her voice. These weren't courtesy calls. They were reconnaissance missions. Just old bank statements and tax records. Your father was very meticulous with his paperwork. Miguel relaxed a bit. Yes, Dad was obsessed with record keeping. He probably saved every receipt for the last 20 years. In fact, I said, deciding to test his reaction, "I found something strange. Your father had some kind of investment account I didn't know about." "Nothing important, just a few thousand." The change in both of their expressions was immediate and unmistakable. Miguel took a step forward, trying to look casual, but failing completely. "An investment account. What kind?" I'm still not sure. The paperwork is confusing. Maybe I need to hire an accountant to help me decipher it. Jimena exchanged a quick glance with Miguel. We could help you with that. Miguel is good with financial documents. I bet he is. I thought remembering the private investigator's report on Miguel's gambling debts and fraudulent loan applications. That's very kind. But I've already scheduled an appointment with Francisco's old accounting firm. They'll know how to handle his investments properly. Miguel's jaw tightened. Mom, those guys charge $300 an hour. I can look at the paperwork for free. I can pay $300 an hour, Miguel. The silence that followed was fraught with tension. Jimena's worried mask was slipping, revealing the calculating woman beneath. Miguel was practically vibrating with frustrated energy. We'd better go, Jimena finally said. We don't want to miss our flight. But Miguel didn't move. Mom, about the message you found on Dad's watch? Maybe I should take a look at those numbers before we leave just to make sure they're not something important. What numbers? Jimena asked sharply. Miguel gave her a warning look. Mom found some kind of code on the watch. Probably nothing, but you never know. Jimena was fully alert now, her excitement about the vacation replaced by laser-like focus. What kind of code? I stood up slowly, using my full height to glare at my daughter-in-law. The kind that's none of your business. Jimena's face turned red. Excuse me. Did you hear me? My husband left me a private message. Private being the key word. Mom! Miguel stood between us, his voice taking on that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. We're family. There's no need for secrets. Secrets? I almost laughed at the irony. Like secret gambling debts or the secret company you've been using to buy properties with money you don't have. The color drained from Miguel's face. Jimena's mouth fell open. I don't know what you're talking about, Miguel said, but his voice was now shaky. Does Inversiones Silva SDRL de CV tell you anything? I saw both of them pale. Your father knew Miguel. I knew everything. Jimena recovered first, her voice turning cruel. Crazy old woman, you know nothing. I know your husband owes $180,000 to offshore gambling sites. I know he's been researching ways to declare me incompetent, and I know he's been planning this for months. Miguel leaned against the doorframe as if his strings had been cut. The fight drained out of him. What? He whispered. Your father hired a private detective. Every lie, every debt, every plan you made to steal from us, it's all documented. I walked to the desk and took the private detective's report, watching Miguel's face as he recognized the heading. Francisco protected me from you even after his death. That code you're so interested in is the key to more money than you ever dreamed of. Money that will never ever belong to you. Jimena grabbed Miguel's arm. We need to go now. But Miguel was looking at me with something resembling respect for the first time in years. He really knew. He knew his son was planning to steal his own mother. What kind of man does that make you, Miguel? For just a moment, Miguel looked like the little boy I'd raised, confused and ashamed. Then Jimena's grip on his arm tightened, and the moment passed. This isn't over, Jimena hissed as they headed for the door. Yes, it's over, I shouted at them. It's been over since the day you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. The front door slammed shut, leaving me alone with my husband's secrets and the knowledge that the real fight was just beginning. 2 days after Miguel and Jimena's dramatic departure, my doorbell rang at 8 a.m. Through the magic eye, I saw a woman in an expensive suit, holding a folder. Behind her was a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a law school catalog. Ms. Silva, I'm Caterina Ramos from Ramos & Associates. This is my colleague, David Kim. We represented his son Miguel in some family legal matters. Family legal matters. That was one way of putting it. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "What can I do for you?" Katerina smiled with the kind of practiced warmth that probably cost $300 an hour. "Mrs. Silva, your son is concerned about your well-being. He asked us to discuss some options that may be beneficial to everyone involved." David stepped forward, taking a tablet. "We understand that you may have discovered some financial accounts that your late husband kept private. While we're sure he had good intentions, managing complex investments can be overwhelming, especially during the grieving process." Overwhelming. As if he hadn't spent 40 years managing our household finances down to the last penny, while Francisco secretly played real estate mogul. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of handling my own affairs." Katerina's smile never wavered. "Of course it is, but consider this. Your son could help carry that burden. We've drawn up some documents that would give Miguel power of attorney over your financial decisions, only temporarily until you've had time to recover from your grief." There it was, exactly what Francisco's private detective had warned me about. "Temporarily," I repeated. "And who determines when my mourning period is over?" David exchanged a look with Katerina. "That would be up to you, of course." "Of course." I took a step back toward my door. "Gentlemen, I think we're done here." "Mrs. Silva." Katerina's voice sharpened slightly. "Your son is preparing to file a petition in court regarding your mental competency. He's concerned about some erratic financial decisions you've been making." "What erratic decisions?" "Accessing offshore accounts, conducting international financial transactions without professional guidance. To an outside observer, it might seem like you're not thinking clearly." The threat was crystal clear. Sign the power of attorney voluntarily, or would I be forcibly declared incompetent? "You know what's interesting about threats?" I asked, leaning against my doorframe. "They only work if the person you're threatening doesn't have better lawyers than you." Katerina's professional mask slipped a little. "Shall I apologize?" I said, "You can tell my son his plan isn't going to work." Francisco left me more than just money. He left me protection. I closed the door in their faces and immediately called the number I'd found in Francisco's hidden files. Tomas Hernandez, the private detective, answered on the second ring. "Mr. Hernandez, I'm Dolores Silva, Francisco Silva's widow." "Mrs. Silva, I've been waiting for your call. Francisco told me you might need my services one day." "Did he do it? About 6 months ago?" "Francisco asked me to prepare a comprehensive legal defense package in case anyone tried to challenge his competency or his right to his assets. Everything was ready to go." Francisco was 3 steps ahead, even in death. How clever. "Sira Silva, when I finish presenting the evidence of your son's gambling debts, fraudulent loan applications, and attempts to manipulate elderly family members, he'll be lucky if he doesn't face criminal charges." For the first time in months, I genuinely smiled. "Mr. Hernandez, I think it's time to make some phone calls." Tomas Hernandez's office was in an elegant downtown building that screamed expensive legal services. As I sat across from him reviewing Francisco's defense package, I realized my husband had been planning this confrontation long before he died. "Your husband was meticulous," Tomas said, spreading documents on his mahogany desk. Bank records showing Miguel's gambling losses. Audio recordings of him discussing plans to have her declared incompetent. Even photographs of him meeting with estate planning attorneys. Audio recordings? Tomas nodded grimly. Francisco suspected Miguel was planning something. So he bugged his house last year, completely legal, since it was his own property. I thought about all the conversations Miguel and Jimena had in my kitchen over the past 6 months. Every disparaging comment about my mental state, every calculation about Francisco's assets, every cruel joke about putting me in a nursing home. Francisco had heard it all. There's more? Tomas continued. Francisco also discovered that Jimena has been systematically isolating her from her family and friends. She's been telling people that you're going senile, that you need supervision. The pieces fell into place. Why had my sister-in-law stopped calling? Why did the neighbors look strange when they saw me? Why had my book club friends been treating me as if I were fragile? Jimena had waged a whispering campaign, laying the groundwork for Miguel's legal challenge. How extensive is the evidence? Extensive enough to destroy any competency challenge and likely put them both in jail for elder abuse and attempted fraud. Tomas picked up a thick binder. But there's one more thing. Francisco left specific instructions on what to do if you needed to access the offshore account. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Francisco's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just a week before Francisco's death. My dear Dolores, if you're reading this, then Miguel has shown his true colors, and you've uncovered the tale I've been building for 40 years. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you about this while he was alive, but I needed to protect you from Miguel until the time was right. The money isn't just an inheritance. It's justice. Every penny came from investments I made using information Miguel thought he was hiding from us. When he started his real estate company, he boasted about his insider deals and guaranteed investments. What he didn't know was that I was listening and investing in the same opportunities with money he didn't know existed. Miguel unwittingly funded his own downfall. With every property he flipped, I bought 3 more in the same area. With every stock tip he mentioned, I invested with money from our original inheritance. The offshore account exists because I used Miguel's own greed against him. Now it's your turn to use his greed against him. Tomas has instructions to make the account transfers immediately. When you read this letter, you'll have a financial independence that Miguel can never touch, but more importantly, you'll have the power to choose how this ends. You can forgive him, care for him despite his betrayal, and hope he learns to be a better man, or you can let him face the consequences of trying to steal from his own mother. The choice is yours, my love. It always was. Forever yours, Francisco. I placed the letter on the table with trembling hands. Francisco didn't just protect me from Miguel. He orchestrated Miguel's downfall by using Miguel's own schemes against him. Mrs. Silva Tomas was watching me carefully. Are you ready to move on? I thought of Miguel when he was a little boy excited about his first day of school. Then I thought of him standing in my kitchen 2 days ago, calling me a crazy old woman while his wife threatened me. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Mr. Hernandez, I want you to file every piece of evidence we have with the appropriate authorities, and I want you to do it today. The next morning, chaos erupted in my quiet neighborhood in Mexico City. I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when 3 black SUVs pulled up to Miguel and Jimena's house across the street. Men in FBI jackets began hauling boxes out of the front door. My phone rang immediately. Mom! His voice was panicked, desperate. What did you do? I answered, calmly protecting myself, watching out my kitchen window as the agents loaded computers and files into their vehicles. What you should have done for your family instead of trying to steal from them. You don't understand. This is going to destroy us. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented it. Jimena's voice came over the phone, shrill and angry. You vengeful old hag, we were trying to help you. Stealing my husband's watch, plotting to declare me incompetent, spreading lies about my mental health to isolate me from friends and family. The line went silent except for Jimena's labored breathing. Francisco knew everything, Miguel. Every debt, every lie, every plan you made to steal from us. He spent the last year of his life protecting me from his own son. Dad wouldn't do that. Your father hired a private detective to document your gambling addiction and your plans to steal my inheritance. He bugged our house so he could record every conversation you had about putting me in a nursing home. I heard Miguel make a sound like a wounded animal. The FBI is seizing your business records because Francisco's evidence shows you used fraudulent information to secure loans. The IRS is auditing you for hiding income, and the state attorney's office is investigating you for elder abuse. Mom, please. Miguel's voice cracked. I never wanted it to come to this. When did it start, Miguel? When did you decide your mother was worth more to you dead than alive? There was a long silence. When Miguel spoke again, his voice was almost a whisper. When I realized Dad was hiding money from us, I saw some paperwork in his office last Christmas references to accounts I'd never heard of. I thought if you two died, it would all come to me automatically. The honesty was brutal, but somehow cleaner than the months of lies and manipulation. You were wrong. Francisco made sure everything would be protected from you. How much? Miguel asked. How much did he hide enough to ensure I'd never need to rely on a family that sees me as a burden? I hung up and watched out the window as FBI agents escorted Miguel and Jimena to separate cars. Jimena was yelling at the agents, probably demanding lawyers and threatening to sue. Miguel seemed simply devastated. My phone rang again. This time, it was my neighbor, Mrs. Patricia. Dolores, I just wanted to call and apologize. Jimena told me you were having memory problems, and I believed her. I should have spoken to you directly. Okay, Patricia. Jimena can be very convincing. Is what they say true? That Miguel was planning to rob you? I looked at the photo of Francisco on my mantelpiece, remembering the man who protected me even after his death. It's true, but it's over now. 3 weeks later, I sat in Tomas Hernandez's office reviewing the final legal documents. Miguel and Jimena were facing federal fraud charges. Their business had been seized and their assets frozen pending investigation. But that morning, an unexpected visitor had arrived. Mrs. Silva, there's someone here for you, Tomas's secretary announced. He says his name is Ricardo Torres and that he has something that belongs to you. The man who entered was about 60 years old, well-dressed, with the kind of careful demeanor that suggested a background in law enforcement. In his hands was a familiar blue velvet box. Mrs. Silva, I'm the one who bought your husband's watch from the pawn shop. I looked at him confused. How did he know how to find me? Ricardo smiled and placed the box on Tomas's table. Because Francisco Silva hired me 20 years ago to protect this watch if something happened to him. I don't understand. I'm a retired federal delegate, Mrs. Silva. Your husband hired me to monitor certain situations. When the watch appeared at the northern pawn shop, I was immediately notified. Tomas was furiously taking notes. Were you keeping an eye on Miguel Silva? Among other things, Francisco was meticulous in his preparations. Ricardo opened the velvet box revealing Francisco's Rolex. But there's something else you need to know about this watch. He turned it over and pressed something on the back. A second hidden compartment opened smaller than the first. Inside was a micro SD card. Francisco recorded everything, Mrs. Silva. Every conversation Miguel had about manipulating her, every meeting with lawyers about declaring her incompetent, every discussion about what to do with her assets after you left. The room spun a little. Francisco had been recording Miguel for 18 months. Audio, video, financial records, everything necessary to ensure Miguel could never successfully challenge my mental competency or my right to Francisco's inheritance. Ricardo inserted the SD card into Tomas's computer. The screen filled with folder after folder of evidence, audio recordings, video files, financial documents, even photographs of Miguel meeting with lawyers and players. Her husband loved her enough to spend the last 2 years of his life building an ironclad legal defense against his own son. I thought about Francisco's final months, how stressed he looked, how many work meetings I had at night. He wasn't hiding from me. He was protecting me. There's one more thing, Ricardo said calmly. Francisco left specific instructions on what to do if Miguel tried to declare her incompetent. He handed me a final sealed envelope, this one titled, Dolores. Final Protection Plan. Inside was a document that made me catch my breath. In the event that Miguel Silva pursues legal action against Dolores Silva's mental competency, the following assets will be immediately transferred to the Children's Hospital of Mexico City in Miguel Silva's name. All investment property belongs to Silva S. of RLDCB. All outstanding gambling debts and loans. All attorney fees and court costs associated with elder abuse charges. Miguel Silva will be personally responsible for all debts and legal consequences, while he will not receive any benefits from any inheritance or transfer of assets. Francisco had arranged for Miguel to inherit his own destruction. Your husband was a brilliant man, Tomas said admiringly. He turned Miguel's greed into a legal trap. Francisco knew Miguel would never stop trying to get the money, Ricardo explained. So he made sure that any attempt to steal from him would result in Miguel losing everything he already had. I took Francisco's watch, feeling its familiar weight in my hands. For 43 years, I'd thought I was married to a simple accountant who worried about money and saved every penny. Instead, I'd been married to a master strategist who spent 2 years orchestrating the most elaborate protection scheme in legal history. Mrs. Silva, Ricardo said gently, your husband asked me to give you a final message if this day ever came. He handed me one last envelope. It was unsealed, inside in Francisco's handwriting. Dolores, you were always stronger than you knew. I just made sure you had the tools to prove it. With love forever yours, Francisco. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Mexico City's Children's Hospital, watching workers install a bronze plaque that read, Francisco Silva, Memorial Wing. Francisco's fortune had been more than enough to secure my future and fund the hospital expansion he always dreamed of. The final irony was that Miguel's attempt to rob me directly resulted in the largest charitable donation in the hospital's history. My phone buzzed with a message from Tomas Hernandez. Miguel's sentencing hearing is next week. They're recommending 2 years in federal prison plus full restitution. Jimena accepted an 18-month plea deal. Do you still want to attend? I replied. No, I have better things to do, and I did. At 73, I was finally living the life Francis had protected for me. I bought a small house near the lake, joined 3 book clubs, and started volunteering at the hospital twice a week. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not what my family expected. My doorbell rang while I was cooking dinner. Through the magic eye, I saw a young woman with Miguel's eyes and a nervous smile. Grandma Dolores, it's me, Sofia, Miguel's daughter. I hadn't seen her since Francisco's funeral. When I was finishing college and starting her first job, Jimena had made sure to keep me and everyone else away from the grandchildren. I opened the door. Sofia, what a surprise. I know I should have called sooner. She was wringing her hands nervously. I heard about Dad and Jimena, about what they did to her. I wanted to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. Yes, I do. I knew something was wrong. Dad was asking strange questions about Grandpa Francisco's finances, and Jimena was always commenting on his memory. I should have said something. I studied my granddaughter's face, seeing Francisco's honesty there alongside Miguel's features. Come in, dear. Let's talk. Over dinner, Sofia told me about her new job as an elementary school teacher, her engagement to a young doctor, and her guilt over her father's crimes. I think I should visit him in prison, she said. But I'm so angry about what he did to you. Anger is normal, but Miguel is still your father. How can you not hate him? I thought of Francisco's letter of the choice he gave me between forgiveness and justice. Because hatred would mean he still has power over me. I choose peace, Sophia's eyes filled with tears. I missed her so much. Jimena told everyone that you were getting confused, that you didn't want to see us anymore. I never stopped wanting to see you, and I never will. As Sophia helped me clear the table, she stopped at the photo of Francisco on the mantelpiece. I always wondered why Grandpa Francisco wore that watch every day. He must have loved it very much. I smiled, thinking of the 2 hidden compartments, the offshore account, the elaborate protection plan that had saved my life. I loved what I protected. That night, after Sophia left with the promise to visit every week, I sat on my porch watching the sunset over Lake Pátzcuaro. Francisco's watch was on my wrist, keeping perfect time. He'd been gone for 8 months, but somehow he was still watching over me. The greatest love stories aren't about passion or romance. They're about protection. About someone who loves you enough to fight battles you don't even know you're facing. Francisco spent 2 years preparing for a war I never saw coming, making sure his death wouldn't leave me defenseless against his own son's greed. Some people spend their entire lives searching for that kind of love. I was lucky enough to wear it on my wrist for 43 years. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on the next video that appears on the screen because it tells the story of betrayal and revolt like never before.